Clara Mae Dawson's trembling hands released her 4 children onto the dusty Texas road as her knees buckled into the scorched earth. "Please," she gasped at the stranger on horseback. "Take my babies! Let me die here!" The cowboy dismounted slowly, his shadow falling across her skeletal frame. "Ma'am," his voice was rough but steady, "I ain't taking your children nowhere." Clara's heart shattered. Then he knelt beside her and said words that would change everything. "I'm taking all 5 of you. If you want to know how this starving widow found hope in the cruelest summer Texas had ever seen, subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We'd love to see how far this story travels. The well bucket hit dry stone for the 3rd time that morning. Clara Mae Dawson stared down into the darkness, her cracked lips moving in a prayer she no longer believed would be answered. 14 months since Daniel died. 3 months since the last rain. And now this, the well that had sustained her family for 6 years, had finally surrendered to the relentless Texas summer. "Mama." Clara didn't turn around. She couldn't let 12-year-old Abigail see the despair in her eyes. "Go back inside, Abby. Check on the little ones." "I already did. Hank's crying again. He's hungry, Mama." "I know." "Sam went to check the creek bed. He thinks maybe—" "The creek's been dry for 2 weeks." Clara's voice came out sharper than intended. She softened it. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Just give me a minute." Abigail's footsteps retreated across the packed dirt. Clara gripped the well's wooden edge until splinters bit into her palms. The pain felt real. Everything else felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. She thought of Daniel, his easy laugh, his strong hands, the way he'd promised her the world when they'd run away from Missouri 17 years ago. "We'll build something beautiful, Clara Mae. Just you wait." They had built something. A small homestead. 4 beautiful children. A life carved from stubborn Texas soil. And then a horse had kicked Daniel in the chest, and everything beautiful had started dying. "Mrs. Dawson." Clara spun around. Old Pete Garrity stood at the edge of her property line, his hat in his weathered hands. He was the closest thing to a friendly neighbor she had, though his ranch was 8 miles east. "Mr. Garrity, what brings you out this way?" Pete shifted uncomfortably. "Heard your well went dry. Came to see if the rumors were true." "Rumors travel fast. Small town." He cleared his throat. "Listen, Mrs. Dawson, I ain't one for beating around bushes. Marcus Webb came by my place yesterday." Clara's blood ran cold at the name. "What did he want?" "Asked if I knew your situation. Asked if I thought you'd be selling soon." Pete's eyes were kind but worried. "Said he's holding 6 months of back payments on your land. Said he's been patient long enough." "Patient?" Clara laughed bitterly. "That man's been circling my property like a vulture since before Daniel's body was cold." "I know it. Everyone knows it." Pete stepped closer, lowering his voice. "He's planning something, Mrs. Dawson. I can feel it. You got anyone who can help family back east?" "My family disowned me when I married Daniel. His family's all gone." "What about—" "There's no one, Mr. Garrity." Clara straightened her spine, that stubborn pride Daniel had loved flaring to life. "But I've survived 14 months alone with 4 young ones. I'll survive this too." Pete looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen. "Take this. It ain't much, but I can't accept charity." "It ain't charity. It's being neighborly. There's a difference." He pressed it into her hands. "And Mrs. Dawson, if Webb comes around causing trouble, you send one of them kids to fetch me. I may be old, but I still know how to handle a shotgun." After Pete left, Clara allowed herself one long drink from the canteen. The water was warm and tasted like leather, but it was the sweetest thing she'd had in days. She saved the rest for the children. Inside the cramped cabin, chaos reigned. 4-year-old Hank was wailing in the corner, clutching his ragged stuffed bear. 7-year-old Rosie was trying to comfort him, her own eyes red from crying. Abigail stood at the empty stove, staring at bare shelves as if willpower alone could make food appear. "Where's Sam?" Clara asked. "Still looking for water." Abigail's voice was flat. "He took Pa's old rifle. That rifle hasn't worked in 2 years." "I know, but he wanted to feel like he was doing something." Abigail finally turned to face her mother. At 12, she had Clara's stubborn chin and Daniel's knowing eyes. "Mama, we need to talk about what's really happening." "Not now, Abby." "Then when we're all too weak to walk? When Mr. Webb shows up with the sheriff?" Abigail's voice cracked. "I heard you and Mr. Garrity. I know about the back payments. I know we're out of food. I know—" Abigail Rose Dawson. Clara crossed the room and gripped her daughter's shoulders. "You are 12 years old. You should be worried about dolls and daydreams, not bank payments, and I haven't played with dolls since Pa died." Abigail's words were quiet, but devastating. Someone had to grow up. Sam's too angry all the time. Rosie still thinks Pa's coming back. And Hank doesn't even remember him. Clara pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace, fighting back tears she couldn't afford to shed. When had her little girl become this? When had survival stolen her childhood? "I'm going to fix this," Clara whispered. "I promise." "How?" Clara didn't have an answer. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Sam finally returned empty-handed and defeated. At 10 years old, he had Daniel's sandy hair and stubborn streak, but lately all Clara saw in him was rage. "Creek's completely dry," he announced, throwing the useless rifle onto the table. "Even the mud holes are gone. Saw 3 dead cattle on the Morrison property." "The Morrisons left last month," Clara said quietly. "Went to California." "Smart." Sam's voice was bitter. "Least they had somewhere to go." "Sam, don't." He held up a hand, and Clara saw how thin his wrist had become. When had her boy started wasting away? "Don't tell me it'll be okay, Mama. Don't tell me God has a plan, or Pa's watching over us or any of that. I'm tired of lies." "Samuel David?" "Pa said he'd always take care of us. He said this land would provide. He said—" Sam's voice broke, and suddenly he wasn't an angry young man anymore. He was a 10-year-old boy who missed his father. "He lied, Mama. He left us, and he lied." Clara gathered her son into her arms despite his initial resistance. He was rigid for a moment, then collapsed against her, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Your father didn't lie," Clara murmured against his hair. "He believed every word. And he didn't leave us by choice. That horse. It was an accident, Sam. A terrible accident." "I know." Sam's voice was muffled. "I know. I'm so angry all the time and I don't know what to do with it." "You keep going, that's what you do. You put one foot in front of the other and you keep going." "What if I can't? Then I'll carry you, like I did when you were small." Sam pulled back, wiping his face roughly. "You can barely carry yourself, Mama. You haven't eaten in 3 days." Clara didn't deny it. There was no point. The children needed what little food remained more than she did. That night, after the children had fallen into restless sleep, Clara sat at the table Daniel had built with his own hands. Spread before her were the family's remaining possessions worth selling: her mother's silver hairbrush, Daniel's army compass, a locket with a tiny portrait of her children as babies. None of it would fetch enough to pay Marcus Webb. None of it would buy more than a week's worth of food. There was only one option left. Clara pulled out a sheet of paper and began to write. To Reverend Thomas Walker, First Methodist Church, Riverbend. I am writing to inquire about finding homes for 4 children. Their ages are 12, 10, 7, and 4. They are good children, healthy despite recent hardships, well-mannered, and Clara's pen stopped. The lie tasted like ash. And desperate, as is their mother who writes this letter with hands that have not stopped shaking in months. I am asking you to do what I cannot give my children a chance at survival. They deserve full bellies and warm beds and futures I can no longer provide. Please do not judge me too harshly. I have fought as long as I could fight. But a mother who truly loves her children knows when to let them go. Clara Mae Dawson. The candle guttered and died as Clara folded the letter. She would take the children to Riverbend tomorrow. It was 15 miles south, a full day's walk in this heat. But there was no other choice. She was preparing to lie down when Abigail's voice drifted from the darkness. "You're sending us away, aren't you?" Clara's heart stopped. "Abby, you should be sleeping." "Answer me, Mama, please." The silence stretched between them, heavy with truths too terrible to speak. Finally, Clara whispered, "I'm trying to save you. By giving us to strangers. By making sure you survive." Abigail was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. "I won't go. And I won't let you send the others away either. We're a family, Mama. We stay together. Abby, Pa wouldn't want us split up. You know he wouldn't. Your father would want you alive. Then find another way." Abigail's eyes gleamed in the darkness. "You always told us Dawsons don't quit. Were you lying too?" The accusation hit Clara like a physical blow. She had said that 1,000 times, every time the drought worsened, every time another animal died, every time Marcus Webb came sniffing around with his predatory smile. Dawsons don't quit. But what happened when there was nothing left to fight with? Morning came too soon, bringing with it the relentless sun and another day without rain. Clara gathered her children, explaining only that they were taking a journey. Sam knew. She could see it in his eyes, the fresh betrayal, the resignation. But he said nothing, just helped his younger siblings dress in their best clothes, threadbare but clean. Rosie asked if they were going on an adventure. Hank asked when they'd be back home. Clara couldn't answer either question. They set out at first light, walking the dusty road toward Riverbend. Clara carried Hank most of the way, his small arms wrapped around her neck. Mr. Bear squished between them. Rosie picked wildflowers that somehow survived in the roadside ditches. Sam walked ahead, silent and rigid. Abigail stayed close to Clara, her expression unreadable. By midday, they'd covered barely 5 miles. The heat was unbearable, and Clara's legs had begun to tremble. Hank had stopped talking entirely, his eyes glassy with dehydration. "Mama, I'm thirsty," Rosie whimpered. "I know, sweetheart. A little further." "You said that an hour ago." Clara had no response. The canteen Pete Garrity had given her was long empty. She'd rationed it carefully, giving most to the children, but it was gone now, like everything else. They were resting in the sparse shade of a mesquite tree when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon. "Someone's coming," Sam announced, reaching for the useless rifle he'd insisted on bringing. "Ryder, maybe 2. Clara struggled to her feet, positioning herself between her children and the approaching stranger. In these parts, unknown riders could mean anything from help to disaster. She'd heard stories of bandits preying on vulnerable travelers. "Stay behind me," she ordered quietly. "No matter what happens." "Mama, I can—" Sam started. "Behind me, now." The rider drew closer, and Clara could make out a tall figure atop a chestnut horse. A second horse trailed behind saddlebags, heavy with supplies. The man's face was shaded by a well-worn hat, but she could see broad shoulders and an easy posture that spoke of years in the saddle. He pulled up his horse 20 feet away, far enough to be non-threatening, close enough to speak without shouting. "Afternoon, ma'am." Clara didn't respond. Her body had begun to sway, the edges of her vision darkening. The stranger dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Ma'am, you don't look so good." "We're fine." The words came automatically, though Clara's knees were buckling. "Just resting before—" She never finished the sentence. The world tilted sideways, and Clara Mae Dawson crumpled onto the scorched Texas earth. When she opened her eyes, she was lying in the shade, a wet cloth pressed to her forehead. A canteen hovered near her lips. "Small sips," a male voice instructed. "Too fast and you'll bring it back up." Clara obeyed, the water sliding down her raw throat, like liquid salvation. When her vision cleared, she saw the stranger kneeling beside her, concern etched across weathered features. Up close, she could see he was perhaps late 30s, with dark hair graying at the temples and deep brown eyes. "My children," Clara tried to sit up. "Easy. They're right here. All 4 of them." He gestured to where her children huddled nearby, watching with frightened eyes. "Your oldest girl's got a good head on her shoulders. Told me you haven't eaten in days." She shouldn't have. She was right too. The man's voice was firm but kind. "Ma'am, with respect, you look like you're about 10 minutes from meeting your maker. When's the last time you had real food?" Clara considered lying. Something in his direct gaze made her reconsider. 3 days, maybe 4. He muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse. "Your kids? They ate yesterday. What was left?" The man stood, moving to his saddlebags. He returned with jerky, hardtack dried apples and a small wheel of cheese. Clara watched in disbelief as he portioned it out among her children, instructing them to eat slowly. "Sir, I can't—" "Name's Josiah Callahan. Most folks call me Joe." He pressed a piece of jerky into her hand. "And you ain't paying me back, so don't even start. This is just one human being helping another. Ain't no debt in that." Hank, who hadn't spoken to anyone but Clara and Mr. Bear in months, suddenly tugged at Joe's sleeve. "Thank you, mister," he whispered. Joe's entire demeanor softened. He knelt down to the boy's level. "You're welcome, son. That's a fine bear you got there. He got a name. Mr. Bear. Well, Mr. Bear looks like he could use a drink too. Mind if I help him out?" Joe mimed, giving the stuffed animal a sip from his canteen. Hank's face broke into the first genuine smile Clara had seen in weeks. "I like him, Mama," Hank announced. Clara didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She settled for eating the jerky Joe had given her, the salty meat restoring strength she hadn't realized she'd lost. As the children ate, Joe turned his attention back to Clara. "Where you headed, ma'am? Town's a good 10 miles south. Riverbend? That's a long walk in this heat, especially with young ones." His eyes were assessing, not judging. "You got family there?" "No." "Friends?" "No." "Then what's in Riverbend that's worth risking 4 children's lives to reach?" The question hit Clara like a slap. She looked at her children, at Abigail's watchful eyes, Sam's barely contained anger, Rosie's innocent trust, and Hank clutching his bear and smiling at a stranger for the first time since Daniel died. "The church there," Clara heard herself say. They find homes for children. Families who can actually provide for them." The silence that followed was deafening. Joe didn't speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was carefully controlled. "You're giving up your children." "I'm saving them." Clara's voice cracked. "Don't you dare judge me. You don't know what I ain't judging." Joe cut her off, but his tone wasn't harsh. "I'm just trying to understand." "What's there to understand? I got 4 hungry kids and no food, a dried-up well, and 6 months of debt to a man who's been trying to steal my land since my husband died. I got nothing left to sell and no one to turn to." Clara's hands were shaking now. "What would you have me do? Watch them starve?" "Mama!" Rosie's small voice broke the tension. "Does this mean we won't be a family anymore?" Clara's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Joe watched the woman struggle to compose herself, watched her pull that broken heart back together through sheer force of will. He'd seen soldiers do the same thing in the war, compartmentalize the unbearable to keep functioning. This woman was a soldier too, fighting a battle she couldn't win. "What's your name, ma'am?" he asked quietly. Clara. Clara Dawson. Clara. He let the name sit between them. I'm gonna ask you something, and I want you to think real careful before you answer. If there was another way, any other way, would you take it? Clara's laugh was hollow. Of course I would, but there isn't. What if there was? She stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Mister, I don't know what kind of game you're playing. No game. Joe stood looking north toward the horizon. I'm foreman of a cattle drive moving 500 head from South Texas up to Kansas. We're camped about 3 miles west of here, resting the herd before the hard push north. What does that have to do with me? We need a cook. Joe turned back to face her. Trail cook took sick 2 weeks back. Had to leave him in Fort Worth. The men have been taking turns making food, and let me tell you, ma'am, cowboys can do many things. Cooking ain't one of them. Clara's mind struggled to process what he was suggesting. You want me to cook for a cattle drive? Pays fair. You'd have food water protection. The children could come along, plenty of hands to help look after them while you work. Joe's expression was earnest. It ain't easy work, I won't lie, but it's honest, and it keeps your family together. A woman on a cattle drive, Clara said slowly. With 4 children, your men would never. My men will do what I tell them, or they'll answer to me. There was steel in Joe's voice now. I've been running drives for 15 years. Any man who disrespects you or your young ones won't just be fired, he'll answer to my fist first. Abigail had been listening intently. Now she stepped forward. Why would you do this? You don't know us. Joe considered the girl's suspicious expression. You're right, I don't. But I know what it looks like when good people run out of options. And I know what happens to families that get torn apart. His jaw tightened. Had a little sister once. When times got hard after our ma died, Pa sent her away to relatives. I never saw her again. She died of fever before I could find her. Clara saw the old pain flicker across his face, quickly suppressed. I ain't looking for gratitude or payment beyond the work you'd do, Joe continued. I'm just offering an honest job to a woman who needs one. That's all this is. Sam spoke for the first time. How do we know you're telling the truth? How do we know you won't hurt our mama? Joe met the boy's fierce gaze with respect. You don't. You got no reason to trust a stranger on a dusty road. All I can give you is my word, and my word's been good for 38 years. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather wallet. Here's a letter of reference from Captain Ezra Finch. He's bossing this drive. You can verify everything I've said when we reach camp. Clara took the letter with trembling hands. It was genuine, she could tell, proper letterhead, formal language, real signatures. It spoke of Josiah Callahan in glowing terms, honest, hard-working, protective of those under his care. What do you say, Mrs. Dawson? Joe asked quietly. Will you let me help you and these young ones? Clara looked at her children. At Hank, finally happy with a stranger's attention. At Rosie, holding a half-eaten apple like it was treasure. At Sam, whose suspicion was warring with desperate hope. At Abigail, waiting for her mother to make the impossible possible. Dawsons don't quit. Maybe accepting help wasn't quitting. Maybe it was just fighting smarter. I ain't much of a trail cook, Clara said slowly. But I can make a meal out of almost nothing. Learned that the hard way these past months. Joe's face broke into a genuine smile, transforming his weathered features. That's exactly what we need, ma'am. And my children stay with me. Always. Non-negotiable. Wouldn't have it any other way. Clara extended her hand. The gesture felt formal, significant. Then you've got yourself a cook, Mr. Callahan. Joe shook it firmly. Welcome to the drive, Mrs. Dawson. As they prepared to head toward the cattle camp, Rosie tugged at Clara's skirt. Mama, does this mean we're not going to the church? Clara knelt down to her daughter's level. No, sweetheart. We're not going to the church. We're going on a real adventure instead. Together. All of us. All of us. That's a promise. And for the first time in 14 months, Clara Mae Dawson made a promise she actually believed she could keep. The walk to the cattle camp took less than an hour, even at the children's pace. Joe led his spare horse carrying the younger ones, while Clara walked beside him, her legs steadier now with food in her stomach. "Mrs. Dawson," Joe said quietly so the children couldn't hear, "there's something you should know before we reach camp." Clara tensed. "What?" "Captain Finch is a good man, but he'll want to make sure you can handle the work before he officially brings you on. There'll be a trial period, few days, maybe a week. And if I fail, you won't." Joe's confidence was surprising. "But if something does go sideways, I'll make sure you and the children get to wherever you need to go safely. You have my word." Clara studied his profile, the strong jaw, the hint of silver at his temples, the quiet certainty in his bearing. "Why are you really doing this, Mr. Callahan? And please don't give me that story about your sister again. I believe it's true, but it ain't the whole truth." Joe was silent for a long moment. "You want honesty. Always. I've been riding trails for 20 years, seen every sunset from Texas to Montana, ate dust and dodged stampedes and buried friends along the way." He paused. "But lately I've been wondering what it was all for, what I'm leaving behind when I'm gone." "That's a lonely thought. It's a true one." He glanced at her. "When I saw you on that road, ready to give up everything you loved to save it, that kind of courage deserves better than a slow death in the desert. Maybe helping you is just my way of doing something that matters." Clara didn't respond, but something shifted in her chest. A crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. Tiny, almost imperceptible. But there. When the cattle camp came into view, hundreds of longhorns spread across the grassland, cowboys moving among them, the chuck wagon sitting at the center like a small ship in a sea of brown. Clara felt the children's excitement despite their exhaustion. "Look at all the cows," Rosie exclaimed. "They're called cattle," Sam corrected, but even he sounded impressed. "That one's looking at me," Hank whispered, pointing at a particularly large steer. He held Mr. Bear up to see. Joe laughed, a warm, genuine sound that Clara realized she hadn't heard from a man in over a year. "That's old Moses. He's been leading herds since before you were born. Gentle as a lamb, that one. Can I pet him? Tomorrow, maybe, after he's had his breakfast." As they approached the camp, Clara saw the cowboys' reactions, surprise, curiosity, and some unmistakable skepticism. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and walked forward to meet whatever judgment awaited. She was done running, done hiding, done surrendering. Clara Mae Dawson had been given an impossible second chance, and she intended to grab it with both hands. Whatever came next, her family would face it together. Captain Ezra Finch was not what Clara expected. The man who ran one of the largest cattle drives in Texas stood barely 5'6", with a white beard that reached his chest and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. He studied Clara and her children like a banker, assessing a loan, calculating every risk. "Joe tells me you need work," Finch said without preamble. "Yes, sir. He also tells me you got 4 young ones and no man." Clara felt her spine stiffen. "My husband died 14 months ago. I've managed fine since." "Managed fine." Finch's laugh was dry. "Woman, you look like you ain't eaten in a week, your children are half starved, and you were walking toward a church to give them away. That don't sound like managing fine to me." The words hit like stones. Clara heard Abigail's sharp intake of breath behind her. "With respect, Captain," Clara said evenly, "what I was prepared to do and what I wanted to do are 2 different things. A mother does what she must for her children. That don't make her weak." Something shifted in Finch's expression. "No, it don't." He circled Clara slowly, his boots crunching on dry grass. "You ever cooked for more than a family? I helped my mother feed 30 farmhands during harvest season back in Missouri. I was 12. That was 20 years ago. Some things you don't forget." Finch stopped in front of her. "I got 42 men on this drive. They work sunup to sundown in heat That'd kill a lesser breed. They need real food, hot filling, and ready when they ride in. Can you do that? Give me a chance and I'll show you. And them. Finch nodded toward the children. They gonna be underfoot. Cowboy's got enough to worry about without dodging young ones. Before Clara could answer, Sam stepped forward. I can work, sir. I know horses. I know cattle. My pa taught me. Finch raised an eyebrow. How old are you, boy? 10. But I'm strong. 10. Finch looked at Joe. You bringing me babies now? That boy walked 8 miles in this heat without complaining once, Joe said quietly. His pa would have been proud. Sam's eyes went bright with unexpected tears. He blinked them away fiercely. Finch studied the boy for a long moment, then turned to Abigail. And you? You gonna tell me you can rope steers too? Abigail met his gaze without flinching. No, sir. But I can help my mother cook. I can mend clothes. I can watch the little ones so they stay out of trouble. She paused. And I can read and write better than most grown men I've met. A smile tugged at Finch's weathered face. Got some fire in you. Good. You'll need it. He turned back to Clara. Here's how this works. 3 days trial. You cook, I watch. My men are satisfied you got a job through Kansas. They ain't satisfied Joe here makes sure you get somewhere safe. Fair. More than fair. One more thing. Finch's voice hardened. I run a clean drive. Any man bothers you or your young ones, you tell me or Joe immediate. I won't tolerate disrespect toward women or children. Understood? Yes, sir. Then get to work. Supper's in 4 hours, and my men are hungry. The chuck wagon was a disaster. Clara stood before it taking inventory of the chaos left by 42 men attempting to feed themselves. Flour spilled across every surface. Dried beans mixed with coffee grounds. A pot of something unidentifiable had burned black and been abandoned. Sweet mercy, she breathed. Told you, Joe said from behind her. Cowboys can't cook. This ain't cooking. This is destruction. Clara rolled up her sleeves. Abby, I need you to sort these supplies. Anything salvageable goes on the right. Anything ruined goes in a pile for me to assess. Yes, Mama. Sam, find me water. Clean water, not from any cattle trough. There's a creek about a 1/4 mile west, Joe offered. I'll show him. Thank you. Clara was already pulling pots from the wagon, scrubbing furiously. Mr. Callahan, when you get back I'll need firewood, lots of it. Joe smiled. Yes, ma'am. Rosie tugged at Clara's skirt. What can I do, Mama? Clara looked at her daughter's eager face and felt her heart squeeze. You, my sweet girl, have the most important job of all. You keep Hank happy and out of trouble. Can you do that? Rosie's chest puffed with pride. I can do that. Good girl. For the next 3 hours, Clara worked like a woman possessed. She cleaned, organized, planned, and cooked with a focus she hadn't felt in months. The familiar rhythm of preparing food, chopping, stirring, seasoning, soothed something broken inside her. She made biscuits from the salvageable flour, stretching it with cornmeal. She soaked the dried beans and set them simmering with salt pork she found hidden in the wagon's depths. She brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead and made a simple gravy that would turn the toughest beef into something edible. Cowboys drifted by throughout the afternoon, curiosity bringing them close. Most tipped their hats politely. A few muttered under their breath. One, a lanky man with a cruel smirk, stopped directly in front of the wagon. Well, well, what do we have here? Clara didn't look up from her work. Supper, which you'll get when it's ready and not a moment before. Feisty. The man leaned against the wagon. Name's Colt Ramsey, and you are busy. Ramsey laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Joe's picked up a stray, I see. Guess he's got a soft spot for damaged goods. Clara's hands stilled. She raised her eyes slowly, and something in her expression made Ramsey's smirk falter. Mr. Ramsey, she said quietly, I've buried a husband, survived a drought, and walked my 4 children through hell to keep them alive. You want to call me damaged goods? Go right ahead. But know this, I've looked death in the face and didn't blink. You don't scare me. Not even a little. The silence stretched between them. Ramsay's jaw tightened. We'll see how long you last, woman. He stalked away. You just made an enemy, Abigail said softly. No. Clara returned to her work. I just showed a bully he can't push me around. There's a difference. When the supper bell rang, Clara stood by the chuck wagon with her heart in her throat. 42 men lined up, plates in hand, skepticism plain on their sunburned faces. The first cowboy through the line was an older man with kind eyes. He took a biscuit, some beans, a piece of beef swimming in gravy. He tasted it cautiously. His eyes widened. Ma'am, he said slowly, this might be the best meal I've had since I left my mother's kitchen. The tension broke like a fever. Men started talking, complimenting, going back for seconds. Even the skeptics admitted grudgingly that the food was good. Joe appeared at Clara's elbow. Told you? It's just biscuits and beans. It's more than that, and you know it. He lowered his voice. Heard about Ramsay. You need me to handle him. I handled him myself. I know. That's what worries me. Clara turned to face him fully. Mr. Callahan, I appreciate everything you've done for us, truly. But I won't hide behind a man every time someone looks at me wrong. I've been doing this alone for over a year. I can take care of myself. I don't doubt that for a second. Joe's eyes were steady on hers. But taking care of yourself don't mean you got to do it alone. Not anymore. Something warm bloomed in Clara's chest. She pushed it down firmly. The children need supper. Clara. The children, Mr. Callahan. She turned away before he could see the flush creeping up her neck. That's what matters. That night, after the camp had settled and her children slept in the small tent Joe had arranged, Clara sat by the dying fire, too exhausted to sleep, but too wired to rest. Mind some company? She looked up to find Captain Finch lowering himself onto a nearby rock with the careful movements of an old man. It's your camp, Captain. True enough. He pulled out a pipe and began filling it. You did good today, Mrs. Dawson, better than good. It was just one meal. It was a test. You passed. Finch lit his pipe, the flame illuminating his weathered face. Joe vouched for you. That means something. He don't vouch for many. He seems like a good man. Best I've ever known. Finch studied her through the smoke. Lost his whole family when he was young. Ma to sickness, Pa to drink, sister to relatives who couldn't be bothered to write. He's been searching for something ever since. Searching for what? Belonging, I reckon. Place where he fits. Finch's eyes were knowing. Might be he sees something familiar in you and them young ones. Clara didn't respond. Couldn't. Get some rest, Mrs. Dawson. Tomorrow we move the herd. Things get harder from here. The next morning brought chaos. Clara was preparing breakfast when the shout went up, cattle spooked by something breaking from the herd and scattering across the plains. Every able-bodied man mounted up and rode out, leaving the camp eerily quiet. Stay here, Clara ordered her children. Don't wander. What's happening, Mama? Rosie's voice trembled. Just the cattle being difficult. The men will handle it. But hours passed, and the men didn't return. Clara kept cooking, kept working, kept her children close. When the dust cloud finally appeared on the horizon, she counted the riders. 41. There should have been 42. Joe rode at the front, his face grim. Behind him, 2 men carried a third across their saddle. Who is it? Clara asked as Joe dismounted. Jenkins. Young kid, barely 19. Horse threw him during the scramble. Legs broken, bad bone came through the skin. Clara's stomach turned. Is there a doctor? Nearest town's 3 days' ride. Joe's voice was tight. Captain's trying to set the bone, but... A scream pierced the air from the captain's tent. I can help. The words left Clara's mouth before she could stop them. My pa was a doctor. Before he took to drinking, I used to help him with surgeries. Joe stared at her. You never mentioned. You never asked. Clara was already moving toward the tent. Keep my children away from this. They don't need to see. Inside the tent, the young cowboy, barely more than a boy, lay writhing on a cot, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. Blood soaked the sheets beneath him. Captain Finch stood over him, looking more shaken than Clara had ever seen. Mrs. Dawson, this ain't... I know what it is. Clara moved to the boy's side, assessing the damage with clinical detachment. I need whiskey-clean cloth, a leather strap for him to bite, and someone strong enough to hold him down. Finch hesitated only a moment. Joe. What followed was the longest hour of Clara's life. She set the bone while the boy screamed and Joe held him steady. She cleaned the wound, stitched the torn skin, and bandaged it tight. Through it all, she kept her hands steady and her voice calm, speaking to the boy in soothing tones, even as she caused him agony. When it was over, Clara stepped outside the tent and vomited into the dirt. Joe found her there, shaking and pale. He said nothing, just handed her his canteen and waited. I haven't done that since I was 16, Clara finally said. Helped my pa set a farmer's broken arm. I swore I'd never do it again. You saved that boy's leg, maybe his life. Maybe. Clara wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Or maybe I just bought him time to die slower. That ain't the woman who walked into camp yesterday talking. Joe's voice was firm. That woman didn't give up. Don't start now. Clara looked at him. Really looked. At the concern in his eyes, the steadiness of his presence, the way he stood close enough to catch her if she fell but far enough to respect her space. You're a strange man, Josiah Callahan. So I've been told. Whoa. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Your children are asking for you. They're worried. Clara straightened, pushing exhaustion aside. Then I'd better go show them their mama's still standing. The next 2 days blurred together. Clara cooked, tended to Jenkins, managed her children, and somehow found reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. The young cowboy's fever broke on the second night, and by the third morning he was asking for solid food. You're a miracle worker, Mrs. Dawson, Finch declared over breakfast. Consider your trial period officially over. You got a job. The cowboys cheered. Even Colt Ramsey, lurking at the edges, couldn't argue with the mood. That afternoon, as the camp prepared to move north, a rider appeared from the south. He wasn't one of theirs. Clara recognized the horse before she recognized the man. Marcus Webb's black stallion was infamous in their county, expensive, mean-tempered, and perfectly matched to its owner. Her blood ran cold. Mrs. Dawson. Webb's voice carried across the camp as he dismounted. I've been looking everywhere for you. Joe materialized at Clara's side. Friend of yours? Hardly. Webb approached with the confidence of a man who believed the world owed him everything. He was dressed too fine for the trail, clean suit, polished boots, gold watch chain glinting in the sun. Clara, thank God you're safe. When I heard you'd disappeared, I feared the worst. Mr. Webb. Clara's voice was ice. How did you find me? Pete Garrity mentioned a cowboy pointed you toward a cattle drive. Wasn't hard to track from there. Webb's smile didn't reach his eyes. You had me worried. A woman alone with 4 children wandering the wilderness. I ain't alone, and I ain't wandering. Webb's gaze flicked to Joe, assessing and dismissing him in one glance. I see. You found employment. That a problem? Not at all. Though I'm surprised you didn't come to me first. You know I've always been willing to help. Webb's voice dropped to something resembling concern. Clara, you're 6 months behind on your land payments. The bank is pressuring me. I've held them off as long as I can, but... Held them off? Clara laughed bitterly. You are the bank, Marcus. You've been trying to take my land since Daniel died. I've been trying to help you. Webb's facade cracked slightly. That land is valuable, Clara. The railroad's coming through next year. I've offered you fair price. You've offered me pennies on the dollar and you know it. Webb's jaw tightened. Fine, have it your way, but the debt remains. If you can't pay, the land becomes mine. That's not cruelty, Clara. That's business. Then take the land. The words shocked everyone, including Clara. Take it. I don't care anymore. My children are fed, they're safe, and they're together. That's worth more than any piece of dirt. Webb's composure finally shattered. You're making a mistake. No. Clara stepped forward, and something in her eyes made Webb step back. I made my mistake when I trusted you'd have a shred of decency. But I'm awake now, Marcus, and I see you for exactly what you are. Which is a vulture, circling dying things, waiting for them to stop moving. Clara's voice was steady as stone. But I ain't dead yet, and neither are my children. So you take your business and your threats and your fancy suit, and you ride back to wherever you came from. We're done. Webb stared at her for a long moment. Then his face twisted into something ugly. You'll regret this, Clara. Mark my words. He mounted his horse and rode south without looking back. The silence that followed was absolute. Then slowly a cowboy at the back started clapping. Others joined in. Soon the whole camp was applauding. Clara's knees nearly buckled. Easy. Joe's hand was at her elbow, steadying her. You just did something real brave. Let it catch up with you. I just lost my home. No. Joe's voice was gentle but firm. You just chose your children over a piece of land. That ain't losing. That's winning. That night, after the camp had quieted and her children slept, Clara found Joe sitting alone by the fire. Mind some company? He looked up, surprised. Not at all. She settled onto the log beside him, closer than she probably should have. The day's confrontation had shaken something loose inside her, some wall she'd built to keep the world out. Tell me about your sister, she said quietly. The truth this time. All of it. Joe was silent for a long moment. Her name was Ruth. She was 7 when Ma died, 8 when Pa sent her away. His voice was rough with old grief. I was 15, old enough to work, so I got to stay. Ruth wasn't useful according to Pa, just another mouth to feed. That's horrible. It was survival. Least that's what Pa told himself. Joe stared into the flames. I swore I'd find her when I was old enough. Spent 3 years tracking down those cousins. When I finally got there, she'd been dead 6 months. Scarlet fever. They hadn't even bothered to write me. Joe. Clara reached for his hand without thinking. I'm so sorry. He didn't pull away. I spent a long time angry. At Pa, at those cousins, at God. Took me years to realize the anger wasn't helping nobody. He turned to face her. When I saw you on that road ready to give up everything to save your children, I saw my mother. She would have done the same thing if she'd had the strength. But Ruth still died. She did. But that wasn't my mother's fault. Wasn't anyone's fault. Sometimes terrible things just happen. Joe's fingers intertwined with hers. What matters is what we do after. Whether we let the terrible things break us, or whether we keep going. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. She hadn't really cried since Daniel's funeral. But here in the darkness, with this stranger who somehow understood, she finally let herself break. Joe held her while she sobbed, saying nothing, just being present. When the tears finally subsided, Clara pulled back, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I don't know what... Don't apologize. Joe's thumb brushed a tear from her cheek. You've been strong for everyone else for so long. It's okay to not be strong sometimes. I don't know how to not be strong. Then lean on someone else for a while. Let them carry some of the weight. Clara looked at him, this man she'd known for barely 3 days, who somehow saw her more clearly than anyone had since Daniel died. Why do you care? She whispered. Really? Why? Joe held her gaze for a long moment. Because some people are worth caring about. And you, Clara Mae Dawson, are one of them. The fire crackled between them. Clara didn't pull her hand away, and somewhere beneath the Texas stars, two broken hearts began slowly, tentatively to hope again. The next morning brought new challenges. Young Jenkins was strong enough to travel, but barely. Clara had rigged a makeshift cushioning system in one of the wagons to protect his leg from the worst of the jolts. "You're too good to us, Mrs. Dawson," Jenkins said as she adjusted his bandages. "Just doing what's right." "No." The boy's eyes were earnest. "What you did setting that bone most folks would have been too scared to try. You saved me. I won't forget it." Clara patted his hand. "Then get better. That's thanks enough." As the drive moved north, Clara fell into a rhythm. Wake before dawn. Cook breakfast. Pack the wagon. Move with the herd. Cook supper. Check on Jenkins. Fall asleep exhausted. Repeat. Her children adapted faster than she expected. Sam had been assigned to help with the remuda, the herd of spare horses, and took to the work with fierce dedication. Abigail became Clara's right hand in the kitchen, anticipating needs before they were spoken. Rosie charmed every cowboy in camp with her sunny disposition and endless questions. Even little Hank was coming out of his shell, following Joe around like a devoted shadow. "That boy's attached to you," Clara observed one evening as Hank fell asleep in Joe's lap. "Feelings mutual." Joe looked down at the sleeping child. "He reminds me of what Ruth might have been like, before everything went wrong. He hasn't talked to anyone but me and Mr. Bear since Daniel died. Until you." Joe's hand rested gently on Hank's back. "Some people just need someone to be patient with them." Clara watched them together, her youngest son, and this man who had appeared out of nowhere and changed everything. Something dangerous stirred in her heart. She pushed it down, again. But this time it didn't stay down. 3 days into the northward journey, a rider came from the south, one of Finch's scouts riding hard. "Captain," the man was breathless when he reached them. "Got trouble coming." "What kind of trouble?" "Organized kind. 8, maybe 10 riders, well armed, been asking about a woman with 4 children traveling with our outfit." Clara's blood turned to ice. "Webb," she whispered. "He sent men." Joe's hand went to his pistol. "How far?" "Half-day's ride, maybe less if they're pushing." Finch's face hardened. "Riding armed to retrieve a woman who don't want retrieving. That sounds like kidnapping to me." "Or worse," Joe said quietly. "Webb won't let her go easy. She embarrassed him in front of everyone." "I should leave." Clara's voice was steady despite her terror. "Take the children and go. You don't need this trouble." "Woman." Finch's voice cracked like a whip. "Did I ask for your opinion?" Clara fell silent. Finch turned to Joe. "How do you want to handle this?" Joe's expression was cold steel. "We circle the wagons tonight. Post extra guards. When Webb's men come, we make it real clear that Mrs. Dawson and her children are under our protection. And if they don't take the hint, then we make it clearer." That night, Clara lay awake in her tent, listening to her children breathe. Outside, she could hear the cowboys taking positions, the click of rifles being loaded. Low voices discussing strategy. These men, strangers until days ago, were preparing to fight for her children, for a woman who had nothing to offer them but biscuits and beans. Joe's voice came from outside the tent. "Clara, you awake?" "Yes." He ducked inside, crouching low in the cramped space. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something." "What?" "I ain't letting anyone take you or these children anywhere. Not Webb, not his men, not anyone." His eyes found hers in the darkness. "You're safe here. You understand? You're safe." Clara reached out and touched his face. "I believe you." Joe covered her hand with his own. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow might be a long day." He was gone before she could say anything else. But as Clara finally drifted toward sleep, one thought echoed through her mind. Maybe after 14 months of fighting alone, she'd finally found someone worth fighting alongside. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth more than any piece of land Marcus Webb could ever take. Dawn came cold despite the summer heat. Clara was already awake, had been for hours, listening to the sounds of men preparing for what was coming. She dressed quickly, then moved to check on her children. All four slept peacefully, unaware that their mother's past was riding toward them with guns drawn. "Mama." Abigail's eyes were open, alert. Of course they were. That girl never missed anything. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart. I heard the men talking last night." Abigail sat up slowly. "Mr. Webb sent people after us, didn't he?" Clara hesitated. Lying would be easier, but Abigail deserved better. "Yes." "Are they going to hurt us?" "No." Clara's voice was iron. "I won't let them. Neither will Mr. Callahan or Captain Finch." "But what if—" Abigail rose. Clara knelt beside her daughter. "Look at me. Whatever happens today, I need you to be brave. I need you to watch your brothers and sister. Can you do that?" Abigail's chin trembled, but she nodded. "I can do that." "That's my girl." Outside the tent, Joe was waiting. His face was grim, his pistol already strapped to his hip. "They're coming. Scout spotted them about 2 miles south." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "How long?" "Less than an hour." Joe's eyes searched her face. "You should stay in the tent with the children. Keep them quiet." "No." "Clara." "I said no." She stepped past him. "These men are here because of me. I won't hide while others fight my battles. This ain't about pride." "You're right. It's about showing my children that their mother don't run." Clara met his gaze steadily. "Whatever kind of woman I'm gonna be from here on out, it starts today. Right now." Joe studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Stay behind the wagons. Don't do anything foolish." "I never do anything foolish, Mr. Callahan." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Now I know you're lying." The camp had transformed overnight. Wagons circled tight, creating a barrier. Cowboys positioned themselves at strategic points, rifles ready. Captain Finch stood at the center calm as a man waiting for Sunday dinner. "Mrs. Dawson." He acknowledged her with a nod. "Shouldn't you be with your young ones?" "My oldest is watching them. I'm more useful out here." Finch raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "Can you shoot?" "My husband taught me. I'm no marksman, but I can hit what I aim at." "Good enough." He handed her a rifle. "Stay low. Don't fire unless I give the word." The waiting was the worst part. Minutes stretched into eternities as Clara crouched behind a wagon wheel, the rifle heavy in her hands. She thought of Daniel, wondered what he would say if he could see her now. Probably something about how stubborn she was. Probably something about how much he loved that about her. "Riders coming." Clara's stomach dropped. They emerged from the south like a dark wave. 8 men on horseback, well-armed and riding hard. At their head was a man Clara didn't recognize, but his bearing screamed hired gun. Professional. Dangerous. The riders stopped 50 yards from the wagons. "We're looking for Clara Dawson." The lead man's voice carried across the distance. "Hand her over, and nobody gets hurt." Finch stepped forward, positioning himself between the riders and the camp. "Mrs. Dawson is under the protection of this outfit. She ain't going nowhere she don't want to go." "This ain't your concern, old man. We got legal papers. She owes money to Mr. Marcus Webb." "Then Mr. Webb can take that up with the courts, not with armed men on a cattle drive." The lead rider laughed. "You got what, 40 cowboys? Most of them boys who ain't never fired at anything but coyotes. We're professionals. This don't have to get ugly." "You're right." Joe stepped up beside Finch. "It don't. You can turn around and ride back to whatever hole Webb pulled you from. Tell him Mrs. Dawson ain't available." The rider's eyes narrowed. "And who are you?" "Name's Josiah Callahan, and I'm the man who's going to put a bullet between your eyes if you take one more step toward this camp." Silence. The kind that came before violence. Clara watched the lead rider calculate. 8 professionals against 40 cowboys. Bad odds, but not impossible. It would come down to who was willing to bleed more. "Last chance," the rider said. "Send out the woman, or—" "No." The voice came from behind Clara. She spun around to see Sam standing there, his father's useless rifle in his hands, his face pale but determined. "Sam, get back." "No, Mama." Sam walked past her, moving toward the gap between wagons. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being scared." "Boy, get back here." Joe's voice was sharp with fear, but Sam kept walking until he stood in plain view of the riders. 10 years old, barely 4 feet tall, holding a rifle that didn't work. "You want my mama?" Sam's voice cracked, but he didn't waver. "You'll have to go through me first." The lead rider stared at the boy. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe even respect. "Kid's got guts. Stupid guts, but guts. He's also got 40 men behind him who'll die before letting you touch him or his family." Joe had moved to stand beside Sam, his hand on the boy's shoulder. "So what's it gonna be? You willing to lose half your men over some banker's grudge?" The rider's jaw tightened. He looked at his men at the cowboys with rifles raised at the boy standing defiant in the morning sun. "This ain't over," he finally said. "Webb, don't forget." "Neither do I." Joe's voice was cold. "Ride out. Now. Before I change my mind about letting you leave alive." For a terrible moment, Clara thought the rider would call his bluff. Then he wheeled his horse around and signaled his men to follow. They rode south without looking back. Clara's knees buckled. She caught herself on the wagon wheel, her whole body shaking. "Mama!" Sam ran to her, the bravado gone, replaced by the scared little boy he really was. Clara pulled him into her arms and held him so tight she thought she might break them both. "Don't you ever do that again," she whispered fiercely. "Do you hear me ever?" "I'm sorry, Mama. I couldn't let them." I know. Clara kissed his hair, his forehead, his cheeks. "You were so brave. Too brave. Your father would be proud and furious all at once." "Really? Really?" Joe appeared beside them, his face a storm of emotions. "That was the stupidest, most reckless thing I've ever seen." Sam's face fell. It was also the bravest. Joe knelt down to the boy's level. "You stood up for your family when grown men would have run. That takes something special, Sam. Don't let anyone tell you different." Sam's eyes glistened. "You mean it?" "Every word." Joe extended his hand. "Partners." Sam shook it solemnly. "Partners." The camp erupted in cheers. Cowboys slapped Sam on the back, calling him brave and foolish in equal measure. For the first time since Daniel died, Clara saw her son smile without shadows behind it. But the celebration was short-lived. "They'll be back." Finch's voice cut through the noise. "Webb ain't the kind to give up easy. He'll send more men, maybe come himself next time." "Then we keep moving." Joe was already thinking ahead. "Push hard for the Kansas border. Once we're out of Texas, Webb's got no legal standing. That's 3 weeks of hard driving." "Then we drive hard." Clara stepped forward. "Captain Finch, I can't ask your men to—" "You ain't asking, I'm deciding." Finch's tone brooked no argument. "My outfit, my rules. And I say we protect our own. You're our cook now, Mrs. Dawson. That makes you family." The word hit Clara like a physical blow. Family. When had she last had that real family, not just blood relations who'd abandoned her for marrying beneath her station? "Thank you," she managed. "I don't know how I'll ever—" Cook good meals and don't burn the coffee. That's thanks enough. Finch turned to his men. Break camp. We're moving out in 1 hour. The next week was the hardest of Clara's life. They drove the cattle relentlessly, covering twice the distance they normally would. Clara worked from before dawn until after dark, cooking meals on the move, tending to tired cowboys, keeping her children safe and occupied. Joe was everywhere, directing the cowboys, scouting ahead, checking the rear for pursuit. He barely slept, barely ate, and whenever Clara tried to force food on him, he just smiled and said the men needed it more. "You're going to collapse," Clara told him one night as he swayed on his feet. "I'll rest when we're safe." "You'll rest now." She pushed him toward her tent. 2 hours. I'll keep watch. Clara. Josiah Callahan. If you argue with me one more time, I swear, I'll put something in your coffee that'll knock you out for a week. Joe blinked at her. You wouldn't. Try me. He went. 2 hours turned into 4, when Clara couldn't bring herself to wake him. She watched him sleep, this man who had appeared out of nowhere and turned her world upside down. His face was younger in sleep, the worry lines smoothed away, the constant vigilance finally at rest. What was happening to her? She'd buried her husband barely over a year ago. She wasn't supposed to feel like this flutter in her chest, when Joe smiled, this ache when he was away, this warmth when he played with her children. It's okay, you know. Clara jumped. Abigail stood at the tent entrance, watching her watch Joe. Abby, you should be sleeping. So should you. Abigail moved to sit beside her mother. You look at him the way you used to look at Pa. I don't. Mama. Abigail's voice was gentle. I'm 12, not stupid. Clara sighed. It's complicated. Why? Because your father just died. Because I barely know this man. Because you're scared. The simple truth of it stole Clara's breath. Yes, she was terrified. Terrified of loving again, of losing again, of letting someone into the broken places Daniel's death had left behind. Pa wouldn't want you to be alone forever, Abigail said softly. He loved you too much for that. How did you get so wise? I listen. Abigail leaned her head against Clara's shoulder. And I watch. And I remember how Pa used to look at you like you were the only person in the world. Mr. Callahan looks at you the same way. Clara wrapped her arm around her daughter. When did you become the parent? About 14 months ago. Someone had to. The words broke Clara's heart and mended it at the same time. Joe woke an hour later, disoriented and annoyed. You were supposed to wake me. You needed the rest. I needed to be doing my job. Your job is keeping us safe. Can't do that if you're dead on your feet. Clara handed him a plate of cold biscuits and beans. Eat, then you can go back to being stubborn. Joe took the plate, their fingers brushing. He didn't pull away, neither did she. Clara, about what I said the other night. About caring. Riders. The shout shattered the moment. Joe was on his feet, instantly reaching for his gun. But this time, the rider coming was one of theirs, a scout named Murphy, riding hard from the north. Captain. Murphy was breathless when he reached them. Got people coming. Not Webb's men, looks like a whole wagon train. Finch emerged from his tent, pulling on his boots. Wagon train out here. Heading west. Looks like homesteaders, lots of families. Murphy's face was grim. And Captain, they're in trouble. Saw smoke. Think they got hit by something. Clara's blood went cold. Hit by what? Bandits, maybe. Or worse. Murphy wouldn't meet her eyes. There were bodies, ma'am. I didn't get close enough to count. Joe and Clara exchanged glances. Both knew what or worse meant out here. How far? Joe asked. 3 miles north. I'm going. Joe was already moving toward his horse. Joe, wait. Finch started. Those are families, Captain. Women and children. I ain't leaving them to die because we're in a hurry. Finch hesitated, then nodded. "Take 10 men. Murphy, show them the way." "I'm coming too." Clara was surprised to hear herself say it. "Absolutely not." Joe's voice was sharp. "You said there might be wounded. I've got medical training. You need me. Your children can stay with Abigail and the Cowboys. She's handled worse." Clara grabbed her medical supplies. "I've done this before, Joe. Let me help." Joe looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he just said, "Stay close to me. Whatever happens. Always." The ride felt endless, every hoofbeat, measuring out the distance between safety and danger. Clara gripped the saddle horn, her medical bag strapped across her chest, prayers she didn't believe in running through her head. When they crested the final hill, Clara understood why Murphy hadn't wanted to say more. The wagon train had been small, maybe 8 or 10 wagons. Most were burning or already burned. Bodies lay scattered across the ground, and in the center of the devastation, huddled together like frightened animals, were the survivors, mostly women, mostly children. "Dear God," Clara breathed. Joe dismounted before his horse fully stopped. "Fan out. Check for survivors. Murphy, watch the perimeter." Clara followed Joe into the nightmare. The smell hit her first smoke and blood and something worse. She pushed it aside, forced her legs to move her hands to work. A woman lay near one of the wagons, her dress soaked red, her eyes flickering. Clara dropped beside her. "Ma'am, I'm here to help. Can you hear me?" "My babies." The woman's voice was barely a whisper. "Please, my babies. Where are they?" "Wagon. Hid them in the wagon." The woman's hand gripped Clara's with surprising strength. "Please, save my babies. I'll find them. I promise." Clara looked up to find Joe beside her. "She's bad. Needs more help than I can give. Stay with her. I'll check the wagon." He was gone before Clara could protest. She turned back to the woman working frantically to stop the bleeding, knowing in her heart it was probably too late. "What's your name?" Clara asked, trying to keep the woman conscious. "Mary. Mary Parker." "Mary, I need you to stay awake. Can you do that?" "I'm so tired." I know you are. But your children need you. They need their mama." Mary's eyes found Clara's. "You're a mother too. I can tell." 4 children. 2 boys, 2 girls." 4. Mary smiled weakly. "I have 3. Had 3. Clara's hands faltered. "Mary, they killed my husband, my oldest boy. He tried to fight. Don't talk. Save your strength. Tell my babies. Tell them I love them. Tell them." The grip on Clara's hand went slack. Mary Parker's eyes stared at nothing. Clara knelt there for a long moment, holding a dead woman's hand, feeling something harden inside her chest. Then she gently closed Mary's eyes and stood. Joe was returning from the wagon carrying 2 small children, a boy and a girl, maybe 4 and 5 years old. Their faces were blank with shock. "They were hiding under the floorboards," Joe said quietly. "Their mother—" Clara shook her head. Joe's jaw tightened. "Anyone else?" "I counted 12 survivors. 6 women, 6 children." One of the cowboys approached. "Most got wounds, but nothing life-threatening. Bandits hit them before dawn, took everything valuable and—" He glanced at the children in Joe's arms. "And worse." Clara's stomach turned. She knew what worse meant for women captured by bandits. Some wounds didn't show on the surface. "We're taking them with us," Joe said. It wasn't a question. "We ain't got room for—" Murphy started. "Then we make room." Joe's voice brooked no argument. "These people got nothing left. We ain't leaving them to die." Clara watched him, this man who'd spent his life running from connections, from roots, from anything that might tie him down. And here he was, taking on 12 more souls without hesitation. "The children," Clara said softly, indicating the 2 in his arms. "They should stay with me. They need a woman right now." Joe transferred the shell-shocked children to Clara's arms. They clung to her immediately, small fingers digging into her dress. "It's okay," Clara murmured, even though nothing was okay. "You're safe now. I've got you." The boy, the older one, looked up at her with eyes too old for his face. "Mama's dead." "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." "The bad men killed her." "Yes." "Will they kill us too?" Clara held him tighter. "No. I won't let them. Nobody's going to hurt you. I promise." The little girl hadn't spoken. She just stared at nothing, her thumb in her mouth, her eyes empty. Clara recognized that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror after Daniel died. Getting the survivors back to the cattle drive took hours. Most of the women could walk through slowly. 2 had to be carried. The children were divided among the cowboys, who handled them with surprising gentleness. When they finally reached camp, Finch took one look at the ragged group and started barking orders. Extra tents were pitched. Food was distributed. Cowboys gave up their own blankets without being asked. Clara worked through the night, tending wounds, cleaning injuries, offering what comfort she could. The women barely spoke, their eyes haunted. The children clung to anyone who would hold them. It was nearly dawn when Joe found her sitting alone by the fire, too tired to move, too wired to sleep. "You should rest. So should you." He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Those children, the Parkers, they keep asking for their mother." "I know." "What do we do?" Clara stared into the flames. "We tell them the truth, when they're ready. And until then, we hold them and we love them and we let them grieve. They've lost everything. They've lost their parents. That ain't everything." Clara's voice was steady despite her exhaustion. "They still got each other. They still got people willing to take care of them. That's more than a lot of folks have." Joe was quiet for a long moment. "You're thinking about what could have happened to your children, if Webb had gotten to you first." "Yes. But he didn't, and he won't." Joe's hand covered hers. "I won't let him, Clara. I swear it." "You keep making promises like that." "Because I mean them." Clara turned to look at him. Really look. At the exhaustion in his eyes, the worry lines on his face, the absolute conviction in his voice. "Josiah Callahan," she said softly, "you're either the best man I've ever met or the most foolish. Can't I be both?" A laugh escaped her, unexpected, almost inappropriate given everything that had happened. But Joe smiled, and suddenly the weight on Clara's chest felt just a little lighter. "The children need sleep," she said finally. "All of them. Mine and the others. I'll check on them." "Joe," she caught his arm as he stood. "Thank you. For everything. For saving those people. For—" She struggled to find words big enough. "For being you." Joe lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Get some rest, Clara. Tomorrow we keep moving. But tonight, just rest." He walked away before she could respond. Clara sat by the fire, watching his silhouette disappear into the darkness, feeling the ghost of his kiss on her skin. Tomorrow, there would be more hardship, more fear, more running. But tonight, for the first time since Daniel died, Clara Mae Dawson allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was something worth running toward. The Parker children wouldn't leave Clara's side. Little Emma, they'd finally learned her name, still hadn't spoken. But her brother Thomas, named for some ancestor neither child could remember, had attached himself to Clara like a second shadow. "Mrs. Dawson." Thomas tugged at her sleeve as she prepared breakfast. "Are we gonna die too?" Clara's heart cracked. "No, sweetheart, nobody's dying. That's what Mama said, before the bad men came." Clara set down her ladle and knelt to the boy's level. "Thomas, look at me. You see all these cowboys, every single one of them is here to protect you. And me, I'm not letting anything happen to you or Emma. You understand?" But you're not our mama. No, I'm not. Clara brushed hair from his forehead. But I'm going to take care of you like you were my own. That's a promise. Thomas's lower lip trembled. Mama made promises too. I know she did, and she meant every one. Clara pulled him into her arms. Sometimes bad things happen that nobody can stop, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. That doesn't mean we stop loving. Thomas cried, then the first real tears he'd shed since they'd found him. Clara held him and let him grieve, her own eyes burning. Joe found them like that 10 minutes later. He didn't say anything, just put a hand on Clara's shoulder and stood guard while a little boy's heart broke and slowly began to mend. 2 weeks into the push toward Kansas, the tension in camp had shifted. The survivors from the wagon train had integrated surprisingly well. The women helped with cooking and mending. The children played with Clara's kids. Something resembling a community had formed from the ashes of tragedy. But Clara noticed other changes too. The way Joe's eyes followed her across camp. The way his hand lingered when he passed her coffee. The way he found excuses to be near her always. You're staring again. Abigail's voice was knowing. I am not. Mama, you're burning the biscuits. Clara yanked the pan from the fire, cursing under her breath. Abigail laughed, actually laughed, and Clara realized it was the first time she'd heard that sound in months. He stares at you too, you know, Abigail said. When you're not looking. Abby. I'm just saying. Pa's been gone over a year. Nobody would blame you for... That's enough. Clara's voice was sharper than intended. She softened it. I appreciate what you're trying to do, sweetheart, but some things are complicated. Love doesn't have to be complicated. When did you become an expert on love? Abigail shrugged. I read, I watch, I learn. Clara shook her head, but a smile tugged at her lips. Go check on your brothers. And Abby? Not a word of this to anyone. My lips are sealed. Abigail's grin said otherwise. That night, Joe asked Clara to walk with him. They moved away from camp far enough for privacy, but close enough to hear if trouble came. The summer stars blazed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. We'll reach Kansas in about a week, Joe said finally. Finch has a buyer lined up in Abilene. Once the cattle are sold, the drive is over. Clara's stomach dropped. She'd known this was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. What happens then? The men scatter. Some head home. Some join other drives. Some drink away their pay in a week and start over. Joe paused. Finch offered me a permanent position, trail boss for his next outfit. That's wonderful. I turned him down. Clara stopped walking. What? Why? Joe turned to face her. Even in the darkness, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. Because I'm tired of leaving Clara. I'm tired of saying goodbye to everyone I care about. Joe, let me finish, please. He took a breath. I've spent 20 years running. From my past, from pain, from anything that might make me feel too much. And then I found you on that road, starving and desperate and still fighting, and something changed. Clara's heart pounded so loud, she was sure he could hear it. I love you. The words fell between them like stones. I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving. I know I got no right to ask for anything, but I couldn't let this drive end without you knowing the truth. The truth. That I want to build something, a home, a life, a family. Joe's voice cracked. With you, if you'll have me. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at this man who had shattered every wall she'd built. Joe, She stopped, started again. Daniel was the love of my life. When he died, I thought that part of me died too. I understand. I'm not trying to replace. Let me finish. Clara stepped closer. I thought that part of me died. But you woke something up. Something I didn't think I'd ever feel again. Hope flickered in Joe's eyes. Clara, I'm scared. The admission cost her everything. I'm terrified of loving someone and losing them again. I don't know if I'm strong enough to survive that twice. Then don't survive it alone. Joe reached for her hands. Whatever comes, we face it together. That's what partners do. Partners. Partners. Friends. Family. He lifted her hands to his chest, pressing them against his heartbeat. Whatever you need me to be, Clara. Whatever pace you need to go. I'll wait. I'll wait forever if I have to. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. She hadn't cried this much since Daniel's funeral. But these tears were different. These tears weren't grief. They were hope. I don't want you to wait forever, she whispered. Joe's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying... Clara rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative. Then, Joe's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and Clara felt something shatter and rebuild all at once. When they finally broke apart, both were trembling. Is that a yes? Joe asked, his voice rough. Clara laughed through her tears. That's a yes, you foolish man? Joe whooped loud enough to startle the coyotes. He lifted Clara off her feet and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. Put me down, Clara gasped between giggles. You'll wake the whole camp. Let them wake. Let the whole world know. Joe set her down but didn't release her. Clara Mae Dawson, I'm going to marry you. I'm going to be a father to your children. I'm going to spend every day of my life making you glad you said yes. That's a lot of promises. I'm good for them. Every single one. They walked back to camp, hand in hand, neither willing to let go. The future was uncertain, the path unclear. But for the first time in over a year, Clara wasn't afraid of what came next. The next morning, Clara told her children. Sam's reaction surprised her most. She'd expected anger, resentment, accusations of betraying his father's memory. Instead, he just looked at Joe with measuring eyes and asked, You gonna stick around for real? For real, Joe said. Long as you'll have me. Pa said that too. Then he died. Sam? Clara's voice was sharp. No, it's fair. Joe knelt to the boy's level. You're right. Your pa made promises he couldn't keep. Not because he didn't want to, but because sometimes life don't cooperate. I can't promise I won't die, Sam. Nobody can promise that. But I can promise that as long as I'm breathing, I'll be here. For your mama. For you. For all of you. Sam studied him for a long moment. You love her. Really love her. More than I've ever loved anything. Even more than your horse. A surprised laugh escaped Joe. Yeah, Sam. Even more than my horse. Sam nodded slowly. Then he extended his hand. Okay. But if you hurt her, I'll shoot you. Soon as I get a rifle that works. Joe shook the boy's hand solemnly. Deal. Rosie was easier. She simply threw her arms around Joe's waist and declared, I knew it. I told Abby you were gonna be our new papa. Hank just held up Mr. Bear and said, Mr. Bear likes you. I like Mr. Bear too, Joe replied seriously. But it was Abigail's reaction that brought Clara to tears. Her oldest daughter walked up to Joe, looked him straight in the eye and said, Thank you. For what? For making my mama smile again. I almost forgot what that looked like. Joe pulled Abigail into a hug. Thank you for sharing her with me. Clara stood surrounded by her children, her family, and for one perfect moment, everything was right in the world. Then Colt Ramsey appeared at the edge of the gathering. Touching, he sneered. Real touching. Boss wants to see you, Callahan. Now. Joe's expression hardened. Tell the captain I'll be there shortly. He said now, and he meant it. Ramsey's eyes slid to Clara with undisguised contempt. Seems there's a visitor. Someone asking about our resident widow. Clara's blood turned to ice. Stay here, Joe told her quietly. Keep the children close. Joe, I'll handle it. He was gone before she could argue. Clara gathered her children into the tent, her heart hammering. Thomas and Emma Parker, sensing the tension, pressed close to her sides. 6 children now, all looking to her for reassurance she didn't feel. Mama. Rosie's voice was small. Is the bad man back? I don't know, sweetheart. But whatever happens, we stay together. Understood. 4 heads nodded. The Parker children just stared with hollow eyes. Outside, raised voices carried across camp. Clara strained to hear but couldn't make out words. Then silence. A silence more terrifying than shouting. The tent flap opened. Joe stood there, his face unreadable. Clara, you need to come. The children. Abigail can watch them. This is important. Something in his voice made Clara's stomach drop. She followed him across camp to where Captain Finch stood with a group of cowboys and a figure Clara had never expected to see again. Marcus Webb. But Webb wasn't the arrogant banker she'd confronted weeks ago. He was disheveled, dirty, and flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals. Mrs. Dawson. One of the marshals tipped his hat. I'm Marshal Henry Cook. We've been looking for you. Clara's legs nearly gave out. I didn't do anything wrong. No, ma'am, but this man did. Cook gestured to Webb. We've been investigating him for months. Fraud, extortion, theft. Turns out half the land he claims to own was acquired through forged documents and intimidation. Clara stared at Webb, who couldn't meet her eyes. Including, Cook continued, the Dawson homestead. The world tilted. What? Your husband owned that land free and clear, Mrs. Dawson. Paid off the note 3 months before his death. Webb forged a default notice, created fake debts. The papers he holds are worthless. Clara's knees buckled. Joe caught her, holding her upright. Are you saying... She couldn't finish the sentence. I'm saying the land is yours, ma'am. Always was. Mr. Webb here is going to prison for a very long time. Cook's expression softened. I'm sorry for everything you've been through. The territorial court has authorized compensation for your suffering. It won't undo the damage, but it might help you rebuild. Clara couldn't process it. Weeks of running, of fear, of believing she'd lost everything, and it was all based on lies. She turned to Webb. The man who had tormented her for over a year, who had sent armed men after her children, who had tried to steal everything she had. Why? Her voice was barely a whisper. Why would you do this? Webb finally met her eyes. What she saw there wasn't the arrogance she remembered. It was something smaller, meaner. Because I could, he said simply. Because you had something I wanted, and I was tired of waiting. Clara's hand moved before her mind caught up. The slap echoed across the camp like a gunshot. Webb's head snapped to the side, her handprint blooming red on his cheek. That was for my children. Clara said, her voice steady, despite the trembling in her limbs. For every night they went hungry because of your greed, for every tear they shed, thinking we'd lose our home. Webb said nothing. The marshals led him away without ceremony. Clara watched him go, expecting to feel satisfaction. Instead, she just felt tired. Tired and overwhelmed and desperate to hold her children. Joe's arms wrapped around her from behind. It's over, Clara. It's really over. I can't. Shh. He turned her to face him, cupping her face in his hands. Take a breath. One thing at a time. The land. Our home. It was ours all along. Yes. I dragged my children across Texas for nothing. Not nothing. Joe's eyes were fierce. You found me. You found this family we're building. You found strength you didn't know you had. None of that would have happened if you'd stayed. Clara laughed through sudden tears. Leave it to you to find the silver lining in a disaster. It's a gift. Joe kissed her forehead. Let's go tell the children. The children's reactions were mixed. Sam wanted to go back immediately. It's our land, Mama. Pa's land. We should fight for it. There's nothing to fight for anymore, Sam. It's ours. The law says so. But what about the cattle drive? What about Mr. Callahan? Clara looked at Joe, who squeezed her hand. That's something we all need to discuss. They gathered that night, Clara, Joe, and all 6 children, including the Parkers, who had nowhere else to go. The fire crackled between them, and Clara felt the weight of the decision pressing down. Here's what I'm thinking, Joe said carefully. The cattle drive ends in Abilene. After that, we got choices to make. What kind of choices? Abigail asked. The Dawson land in Texas. It's yours by right. If you want to go back, I'll take you. Help you rebuild what was lost. And then, Sam's voice was challenging. And then nothing. I stay. We build a life there, together. Joe met the boy's eyes. If that's what you want. Sam was quiet for a moment. You'd give up everything. The trails, the drives, all of it. I'd give up anything for your mother. For all of you. Rosie raised her hand like she was in school. Can we still have cows? Laughter rippled through the group. Yes, Rosie, Clara said. We can still have cows. And can Thomas and Emma stay with us forever? Clara looked at the Parker children, who had gone still at Rosie's question. She'd already been thinking about this, lying awake at night, wondering what would become of them. That depends, Clara said softly. Thomas, Emma, would you want to stay with us? Be part of our family? Thomas's eyes went wide. For real? You'd want us? I'd be honored to have you. Little Emma, who still hadn't spoken since they'd found her, tugged at Clara's sleeve. Clara leaned down and the girl whispered something in her ear. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She said yes. She wants to stay. Joe put his arm around Clara. Looks like we're gonna need a bigger cabin. That night, after the children slept, Clara and Joe sat by the dying fire. 6 children, Clara said. You sure you know what you're getting into? Woman, I've herded 500 cattle through dust storms and river crossings. I reckon I can handle 6 young ones. Cattle are easier. They don't ask questions or argue about bedtime. True. Joe pulled her closer. But cattle can't hug you either. Can't tell you they love you. Can't make you feel like the luckiest man alive just by existing. You're getting soft, Josiah Callahan. Blame it on you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. I never thought I'd have this again, Clara admitted quietly. After Daniel. I thought that part of my life was over. I thought I'd just survive, keep the children alive, and wait to die. And now I want to live. She turned to face him. Really live. Build something. Dream again. She touched his face. Love again. Joe caught her hand and pressed it to his lips. I can't promise it'll be easy. Ranching's hard work and 6 children is no small thing. I know. But I can promise this. He held her gaze. Every morning you'll wake up knowing someone loves you. Every night you'll go to sleep knowing you're not alone. And every single day I'll do everything in my power to make you glad you chose me. I didn't choose you, Clara said softly. I found you. Or maybe you found me. Either way, it feels less like a choice and more like fate. You believe in fate. I believe in you. Clara kissed him gently. That's enough. They sat together until the fire burned to embers, planning a future neither had dared to imagine. And somewhere in the vast Texas night, Daniel Dawson's spirit smiled, knowing his family had found its way home. The cattle drive ended in Abilene on a sweltering August afternoon. Clara stood at the edge of town watching the last of the Longhorns disappear into the buyers' pens. 3 months ago, she'd been ready to give up her children to strangers. Now she had 6 of them, a man who loved her, and a future she'd never dared to imagine. You're thinking too loud. Joe appeared beside her, dusty and exhausted but grinning. I can hear it from here. Just trying to believe this is real. It's real. He took her hand. All of it. The good, the hard, and everything in between. What happens now? Now we say goodbye to the outfit. Then we head south. Joe squeezed her fingers. Home, Clara. We're going home. The word hit her like a physical blow. Home. She hadn't had one of those since Daniel died. Hadn't believed she'd ever have one again. Captain Finch found them an hour later, a pouch of coins in his weathered hand. Your pay, Mrs. Dawson. Full wages plus a bonus for saving Jenkins' leg and keeping the men fed better than any cook I've ever hired. Clara tried to refuse. Captain, I can't. You can and you will. Finch pressed the pouch into her hands. You earned every cent. Don't let pride rob your children of what's rightfully theirs. Clara's throat tightened. I don't know how to thank you for everything. Live well. Raise those young ones right. That's thanks enough. Finch turned to Joe. You sure about this giving up the trails? Never been more sure of anything. Finch nodded slowly. Then I wish you both well. If you ever need work, there's always a place for you in my outfit. I'll remember that. The old trail boss walked away without looking back. Clara suspected he was hiding tears. Saying goodbye to the Cowboys was harder than Clara expected. These men, rough-weathered, often crude, had become family over the past weeks. They'd protected her children, shared their blankets, told stories around campfires that made Rosie giggle and Sam's eyes go wide. Jenkins hobbled over on a makeshift crutch, his leg healing, but still weak. Mrs. Dawson, I owe you my life. You owe me nothing but a promise to take care of that leg. I promise. The young cowboy ducked his head. Ma'am, I've been thinking. I got no family to speak of. No place to go when this drive ended. He hesitated. I was wondering. If you needed an extra hand on your ranch, I work hard. I don't eat much, and I'd do anything to repay what you done for me. Clara looked at Joe, who shrugged. Could use the help. Rebuilding a ranch is hard work. Then it settled. Clara smiled at Jenkins. Welcome to the family. The boy's face lit up like Christmas morning. You mean it, really? I mean it, but you're taking orders from Mr. Callahan, understood? Yes, ma'am. Jenkins practically vibrated with excitement. You won't regret this. I swear you won't. Even Colt Ramsey approached, though he couldn't quite meet Clara's eyes. Mrs. Dawson, He shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't right. How I treated you. I was angry about things that weren't your fault and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. Clara studied the man who'd made her first weeks on the drive so difficult. She could hold on to the grudge. It would be easy, even justified. But she was tired of carrying weight that didn't serve her. Apology accepted, Mr. Ramsey. His head snapped up in surprise. Just like that. Just like that. Life's too short for grudges. Clara extended her hand. Fresh start. Ramsey shook it, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Fresh start. The journey south took 3 weeks. They traveled slowly, mindful of the children and Jenkins's healing leg. Along the way, they stopped in small towns, gathering supplies, news, and hope. Clara learned to sleep through the night again, to laugh without guilt, to dream without fear. The children transformed before her eyes. Sam's anger softened into something more manageable. Rosie's questions multiplied exponentially. Hank started talking more, though still only to a select few. Abigail began to act like a 12-year-old instead of a tiny adult. And the Parker children. Thomas and Emma slowly emerged from their shells of grief. Emma spoke for the first time 2 weeks into the journey. They'd stopped by a creek and she'd found a family of ducks paddling in the shallows. Look, Mama. The word slipped out before she could stop it. Clara froze. So did everyone else. Emma's eyes went wide, then filled with tears. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Don't. Clara knelt beside her, heart pounding. Don't apologize. You can call me whatever you want. Whatever feels right. But my real mama. Your real mama loved you more than anything. She'd want you to be happy. She'd want you to have someone to call mama again. Clara's voice cracked. If that's me, I'd be honored. Emma threw herself into Clara's arms. Mama, she whispered again, and the word was a prayer and a promise all at once. Thomas watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. Clara didn't push. Some wounds needed more time. 3 days later, he approached her while she was cooking supper. Mrs. Dawson. Yes, Thomas. Mr. Callahan asked if I wanted to learn to ride proper, like a real cowboy. What did you tell him? I said yes. Thomas scuffed his boot in the dirt. He's nice. Different from my pa, but nice. Different how? My pa was loud, always laughing, always making jokes. Thomas's voice went quiet. Mr. Callahan is quiet, but when he talks he means it, every word. That's a good way to describe him. He loves you a lot, I can tell. How can you tell? Thomas looked up, his eyes too old for his face. The way he watches you, like he's afraid you might disappear if he looks away too long. He paused. My pa used to look at my mama like that. Clara's heart ached. Come here. Thomas let her hug him, his small body rigid at first, then slowly relaxing. You can call me whatever you want, Clara murmured against his hair. But know this, you're my son now. Not because the law says so, but because my heart does. Thomas pulled back, his eyes glistening. Can I call you Ma? Mama feels too much like her. But Ma is different. Ma is perfect. The day they reached the Dawson homestead, Clara didn't recognize it at first. Without the weight of fear and starvation, the land looked different. The well had refilled after summer rains. The house stood solid and waiting. Wild grasses had reclaimed the fields, but underneath the soil was rich and dark. Welcome home, Joe said softly. Clara couldn't speak. She just stared at the place that had been hell 3 months ago and saw only possibility. It needs work, Sam observed, ever practical. Roof's got damage, fencing is down. Then we'll fix it. Joe ruffled the boy's hair. Together. Can I pick my own room? Rosie was already running toward the house. Rosie, wait, Clara called, but Abigail was faster. I've got her mama. Clara watched her children scatter across the property, their property, and felt something loosen in her chest. A knot she hadn't even known was there. You okay? Joe asked. I'm home. Clara turned to face him. I'm really home. You are. Joe pulled her close. And you're never leaving again. The first week was chaos. They cleaned and repaired, hammered and scrubbed, fell into bed exhausted each night, and woke before dawn to do it again. Jenkins proved his worth 10 times over, handling heavy labor that would have been impossible otherwise. Neighbors came to help, some out of genuine kindness, others out of curiosity. Word had spread about Marcus Webb's arrest, and suddenly, Clara Dawson was the talk of the county. Widow Martha Brennan arrived on the 3rd day with 3 pies and a wagon full of supplies. Heard you were back, she said gruffly. Figured you could use some help getting settled. Clara burst into tears. None of that now. Martha pulled her into a firm embrace. You survived, didn't you? Kept those children alive and found yourself a good man in the bargain. That's something to celebrate, not cry over. I don't know how to thank everyone. We're neighbors. This is what neighbors do. Martha pulled back, studying Clara with sharp eyes. That cowboy of yours, he treating you right? Better than I deserve. Good, because I've got a shotgun and I ain't afraid to use it. The wedding took place on a Sunday morning in early September. The whole county came, or so it seemed. Cowboys from the cattle drive rode down for the occasion, Jenkins standing proudly as Joe's best man. Captain Finch made the journey gruff as ever, but with suspiciously bright eyes. Clara wore a dress Martha had helped her make simple, but beautiful white cotton, with tiny blue flowers that matched her eyes. Abigail fixed her hair. Rosie scattered wildflowers down the makeshift aisle. Sam walked Clara to Joe. The boy had insisted on it. "Pa would have wanted me to," he explained, "since he can't be here himself." Clara kissed her son's forehead. "Your father would be so proud of you." "I know." Sam's voice was steady. "He'd be proud of you too, Mama, for not giving up, for finding a way." Joe waited at the front, cleaned up and nervous, in a way Clara had never seen. When their eyes met, his entire face transformed. "You're beautiful," he breathed as she reached him. "You're not so bad yourself." The traveling preacher cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony was simple, traditional vows spoken with trembling voices and tear-filled eyes. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Joe kissed Clara like she was the only person in the world. The children cheered. The cowboys whooped. Martha Brennan wiped her eyes and pretended she wasn't crying. Clara Mae Dawson became Clara Mae Callahan, and for the first time in over a year, she felt complete. The celebration lasted well into the night. Dancing and food and laughter filled the small homestead. Children ran wild, sugar-high, and delirious with joy. Cowboys told increasingly outrageous stories, while the women pretended to be scandalized. Clara found a quiet moment to slip away, standing at the edge of the property where she could see Daniel's grave on the rocky hillside. "I hope you approve," she whispered to the wooden cross. "He's a good man. He'll take care of us. I'll never forget you, Daniel. But I couldn't stop living just because you did." Talking to someone. Joe appeared beside her, 2 cups of cider in his hands. "Just saying goodbye." Clara accepted the cup. "And thank you. To Daniel. He'd want me to be happy, I know that, but sometimes I still feel guilty." Clara. Joe turned her to face him. "Your first husband gave you 4 beautiful children and years of love. Nothing about our marriage erases that. Nothing about loving me dishonors him." "I know. In my head I know." "Then let your heart catch up." Joe kissed her forehead. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." They stood together as the celebration continued behind them, watching the stars emerge one by one. "I've been thinking," Clara said finally, "about the Parker children." "What about them?" "I want to make it official, proper adoption. I want them to be Callahans just like the rest of us." Joe was quiet for a moment. "You sure that's a big step?" "They lost everything. Their parents, their home, their whole world. The least we can do is give them a real family, a real name." Clara looked up at him. "Unless you don't." "I want it too." Joe's voice was rough with emotion. "Was afraid to bring it up. Didn't want to push." "Then we agree. We agree." The adoption was finalized 6 weeks later. Thomas and Emma Parker became Thomas and Emma Callahan in the eyes of the law and the heart of their new family. Emma cried. Thomas tried not to, but failed spectacularly. "Does this mean we're really yours now?" Emma asked, clutching her new certificate like a treasure. "You were always really ours," Clara told her. "This just makes it official. Forever, forever and always." Thomas approached Joe with unusual hesitation. "Mr. Callahan, I mean." "Pa..." Joe's breath caught. "Yeah, son." "Thank you. For choosing us." "Thank you for letting me." Joe pulled the boy into a fierce hug. "I know I'm not your first pa. I know I can't replace him, but I swear I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of that title." "You already are." Winter came early that year, but the Callahan homestead was warm and full. 8 people now: Clara and Joe Abigail and Sam Rosie and Hank Thomas and Emma. Plus Jenkins in the bunkhouse they'd built for hands and a rotating cast of neighbors and friends who seemed to find excuses to visit. Clara stood at the window one December evening, watching snow fall softly on the land she'd almost lost. Inside, chaos reigned, children arguing over who got the last biscuit, Joe trying to referee Jenkins, adding unhelpful commentary from the corner. Her family. Her beautiful, impossible, hard-won family. Mama. Hank tugged at her skirt. He was 5 now, growing like a weed, finally talking freely to everyone. Why are you crying? Clara hadn't realized she was. She knelt down and pulled her youngest son close. Happy tears, sweetheart? Just happy tears. Because you love us. Because I love you all so much, my heart can't contain it. Hank nodded seriously, then held up Mr. Bear. Mr. Bear loves you too. Tell Mr. Bear I love him back. That night, after the children were finally asleep and the house fell quiet, Clara and Joe sat by the fire. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. They didn't need words. They rarely did anymore. Any regrets? Joe asked finally. Clara thought about it. The fear and hunger of those early months, the desperation that had driven her to almost give up her children, the long road that led her to this moment. Not a single one, she said. Every terrible thing that happened brought me here. To you. To this family. I wouldn't change any of it. Not even the starving part. Well, maybe that part. Clara smiled against his chest. But everything else, no. It all led somewhere good. Somewhere home. Somewhere home. Spring came with new life and new hope. Clara discovered she was pregnant on a bright March morning. She told Joe while he was feeding the horses, and he dropped the bucket, picked her up, and spun her around until they were both dizzy. Another baby, he kept saying. Another baby. You're surprised we are married. I know, He set her down, his eyes bright with tears he'd never admit to. I never thought I'd have this, any of this. A wife, children, a home. And now you have all of it. Now I have everything. The children reacted with typical chaos. Rosie wanted a sister. Sam pointed out they already had too many people in the house. Abigail started planning how to rearrange the rooms. Thomas offered to help build a crib. Emma put her hand on Clara's stomach and declared she could feel the baby kicking, even though it was far too early. Hank asked if the baby could share Mr. Bear. I think the baby would like that very much, Clara told him. Summer returned, marking 1 year since Clara had walked onto that dusty road with 4 starving children and a letter that would have destroyed her family. She thought about that woman sometimes, the desperate widow who'd been ready to give up everything. She barely recognized her anymore. On the anniversary, Clara gathered her family, all 8 of them, plus the baby growing inside her on the porch of the home they'd rebuilt together. 1 year ago, she said, I thought my life was over. I thought there was nothing left but survival and pain. I was wrong. She looked at each face in turn. Abigail, 13 now, and growing into a remarkable young woman. Sam, 11, and learning to channel his anger into hard work. Rosie, 8, and still asking 1,000 questions a day. Hank, 5, and finally thriving. Thomas, 6, and quietly devoted to his new family. Emma, 5, and blooming with each passing day. And Joe. Her Joe, the stranger who'd stopped on a dusty road and changed everything. We built something beautiful, Clara continued. Not because life was easy, but because we refused to give up on each other. This family, this improbable, impossible, wonderful family exists because we chose love over fear, every single day. Mama's getting sentimental again, Sam muttered, but he was smiling. Let her be sentimental, Abigail said. She earned it. Joe stood and raised his cup of cider. To the Callahans, past, present, and future. To the Callahans, the children echoed. Clara touched her stomach where new life was growing. The future stretched before them, uncertain, challenging, full of unknowns. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had her children. She had her husband. She had a home filled with love and chaos and laughter. And she had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the darkest roads lead to the brightest destinations. Sometimes losing everything is the first step to finding what you really need. Sometimes a starving widow meets a cowboy on a dusty road, and he doesn't just save her children. He saves her. Clara May Callahan looked at her family, her home, her beautiful life built from ashes and hope. And she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. This was her story, her triumph, her home. And nothing, not drought, not despair, not any force in this world would ever take it away.